This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this edition of A Different Perspective. I always feel sort of weird introducing myself because you just heard who I am, but I am in fact Kevin Randle. I wanted to start with just a brief thing. I got an email from John Greenwald this morning, and he had received information from a FOIA request on Philip Corso, the retired lieutenant colonel who was making all kinds of noise 20 years ago about what he had seen and what he had done. And it was the FBI file. It didn't cover the period after he had retired. It was a period while he was on active duty and some of the things that he had been doing and some of the conspiracies he talked about and some of the attitudes he had. It not very flattering for Corso, but it makes you wonder about the accuracy of the other information he said. And for those who'd like to see it, I'll post a link to my blog and you can read it for yourself and decide whether or not it is persuasive. I myself don't believe much of what Corso said about it because, as I've said before, the first lie was on the cover of his book where it said Colonel Philip Corso. And when you asked him about that, he said, well, when he retired, he was promoted to colonel, but there's no evidence to verify that. He was, in fact, a lieutenant colonel. Addressing him as colonel is just fine, and addressing him as colonel in correspondence, but when he was challenged about that, rather than saying, yes, that was a mistake the editors made or the publisher made, he said, no, I was promoted to colonel upon retirement. I just don't believe that. Anyway, that's enough of Colonel Corso, which does kind of lead us into the Roswell case somewhat. I'm going to be talking with David Jones here, who wrote the book, the Roswell Memo. And once again, I've left my notes where I can't get at them. Just so you know, what I have here is over the years, David Jones has had a variety of occupations, including shipping agent, short story writer, and has a degree in art history and classical studies. His research into the Roswell Incident began in the summer of 2022 and ended in the winter the following year when his work on the Ramey Memo and the accompanying book was completed. He lives in West Midlands and runs a small online shop selling art prints. David Jones, welcome to A Different Perspective.
Hello, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
What inspired you in the summer of 2022 or in 2022 to delve into the Ramey Memo?
Well, I just gotten off the back of a 20-year stint of being a skeptic on the whole ET issue. And it was the 75th anniversary of the Roswell crash. And I thought, shall I look into this? I didn't really have much to do at the time because I wasn't working full time. I kind of retired early to do something else. And the Roswell Incident has always been, I guess, that one subject that has been above all others when it comes to UFOs, etc. So I got some books on the internet, started watching some more programs. One of these programs was called History's Greatest Mysteries, featuring yourself in an episode about the Ramey Memo. And you put the Ramey Memo under the latest type of scanner. I think it was a Giga macro scanner or something like that. And you wanted to see if the word victims was there before of the wreck. That famous line, which everyone who knows about the Ramey Memo knows. And it seemed to me that it didn't say victims. It was about a 7-letter word, ending with what appeared to be ing, beginning with P. That was pretty clear to me. After a couple of days, I was thinking about that because it intrigued me. and I wondered if a possible word could be the packing of a wreck, as in being packed for transport.
Well, let me interrupt here. Let me interrupt you here. Before you did any real research, you thought the word might be packing as opposed to victims, or viewing, as some others have said. Yeah. So that was before you had gotten your own copies of the photograph.
Yes, it was after that when I thought maybe it's packing. I decided to get copies of the scan from the website of the University of Texas at Arlington, Special Collections. So I downloaded them, had a look. I could see the P, I could see what appeared to be ing, but I couldn't see the middle three letters. And eventually I found the second letter, and that was an I.
Did in your research, you were aware, of course, of the controversy about the word victims of the wreck?
Absolutely.
That a lot of people, when they first view that document in an expanded state or enlarged state, see the word victims. Looking at it, I can see the word victims. I can also see the word viewing, and I also can see a couple of other words that might be there as well. I think remains comes up periodically in the discussion. But you saw packing.
Yeah, well, I saw PA and ing. Eventually, I did find a C that was slightly out of alignment with the rest of the word. Enough to convince me that the word was packing. Eventually, I did find another letter, and that was a second A that appeared to be some type of typo. So it was spelled PACAKING.
Did you do any kind of historical research, looking into a lot of other documents or books or magazine articles before you really got into this?
No, not on the Ramey Memo. I knew that, I knew about pareidolia, and that could be a factor. But other than that, there was no research I did, apart from David Rudiak's interpretation. Most of which I couldn't see, apart from the word wreck, which seemed to be there.
Well, I know that there's certain words that almost everybody sees. When you look at the memo, a kid with a magnifying glass picks them out. Fort Worth, Texas, for example, weather balloons are two of these areas. I know that you looked at the work that Jim Horan and I had done on the experimentation, where we had three separate groups looking at the memo based on what we told them about the memo to begin, to see how that played across the various experiments.
So a lot of people have their own interpretation, but there are words that are universally seen, like weather balloons, Fort Worth, Texas, disc, which to me indicated there was a level of readability to it that was real and not imaginary.
So in your book, you talk about some of the history of the Roswell case. Where did you derive that history from?
I used various sources. I had a copy of the Roswell Incident by Berlitz and Moore, another Roswell book. I used newspaper articles at the time, and a lot of the stuff I got was from the Air Force's Roswell report from 1995.
Well, that's an important document when you're researching the Roswell case, to have that report, because having spoken to Colonel Weaver a number of times, I think we owe him a thanks for putting all that documentation in there, especially about the balloon launches and the work going on at Alamogordo, New Mexico at the time. I think that's important stuff to do. And without all of that information, a good case can be made for the mogul explanation until you start reading the documentation, and it takes it out of the running. Did you get that impression as well?
I did. The first time I read it, I think it's 994 pages, so it's a daunting read for anyone, and it was for me. I came away pretty much veering on the side of the mogul balloon theory. I think because of the amount of diagrams, charts, pictures, statements, the evidence appeared to be there. But at the same time, I was aware of the testimony of people like Jesse Marcel Sr. and Walter Hout, people who were at the heart of events, which contrasted with what was being claimed in the Roswell report.
Well, there was a great deal of information there, and I think the critical information was the only culprit they could find was flight number 4, which was canceled according to the documentation. So how could flight number 4 have dropped debris on the Brazel Ranch?
Yeah.
Or the Foster Ranch, we should say.
Yeah, I don't know, it's maybe there's some element of smoke and mirrors attached to it.
Okay, so you're not a fan of the mogul explanation anymore?
Not anymore, no, not after looking at the memo.
Well, the one thing that bothered me, I read, of course, your bibliography, which is very sparse. I would have liked to see more of the documentation that you now tell me you reviewed in that bibliography, because it would give me a better impression of where you were coming from with the book.
Okay, well, I did put some of the primary sources in the introduction, which I looked at them and just examined them. So, and that was in the bibliography, and a lot of which was from the Roswell report, which was in the bibliography.
But I guess my problem simply is that the bibliography sort of diminishes your work, because I look at the bibliography and I see you quote Cal Korff, for example, and his stuff has been thoroughly discredited. He made stuff up. He invents witnesses. He mischaracterizes what people have said and all that sort of thing. So it kind of diminishes his work in that respect. And I'm not sure that it would have been very helpful for you.
Okay, well, I only put it in there because there was a claim that Brigadier General Thomas Dubose, when he was the Ramey's chief of staff as a colonel, that he personally was there at Fort Worth to take charge of the cargo from Roswell and hand carried it to Ramey's office, and that the suggestion was that there was a cover-up for the mogul balloon theory, and that's what Cal Korff in that article that I listed in the bibliography outlined.
Well, we're going to have to take a break here, so we'll come back to that in just a moment. My book's on Roswell. The latest book is Understanding Roswell, for those of you who'd like to get a little bit look at the background of some of the people who are involved in the case and what happened to them after the Roswell incident, and gives you another examination of what's going on. But we'll be back right after this, talking with David Jones. And yes, we're back with David Jones. And I must confess here, I am very bad at promoting people's work, especially my own. His book, of course, is the Roswell Memo, which is the discussion of the Ramey Memo. His website is etsy.com/uk/shop/Night Cafe Prints. Cafe Prints is all one word, and it's all lowercase. So you can take a look at, I guess it's the artwork that you...
It is, yeah. It's just some little prints I do.
I'll put a link to it up there on my blog when
thank you.
I get around to it. But it has really nothing to do with Roswell or UFOs or anything.
No, it doesn't at all.
And sometimes that's a good thing, I think.
Yes, it's always good to get away from a whole Roswell UFO business.
So in looking at your book, I guess some of the things that bothered me is, and it's really kind of trivial, I suppose. Mac Brazel's name was spelled with a K.
I've noticed you do that, but I thought it was M-A-C.
Yeah, but we explained that 30 years ago when we got a picture of his grave. Tom Perry took a picture of his grave in, I think, Tularosa, New Mexico, and we realized it's M-A-C-K. And
that would figure, because he wasn't it a childhood nickname because he looked like McKinley or something.
Yeah, exactly. But they called him Mac.
Yeah.
And probably something you didn't know that was it his brother, Wayne Brazel, or a relative, Wayne Brazel, is the man who killed Pat Garrett, who was the man who killed Billy the Kid.
Ah,
And
that is
and I've mentioned this before on this program, and I'll do it for your edification, I suppose. But there was a trial held in New Mexico of Wayne Brazel. He was acquitted of murder, but the only deal was he had to get out of New Mexico, so he moved to Arizona. The only reason this is important is if you're studying the history of Lincoln County and the Lincoln County Wars, you come across that information. The historians would say, well, we don't know what happened to Wayne Brazel. He disappears, he falls off the earth at that time. Maybe he went to South America like Butch Cassidy. In driving across the New Mexico desert with Bill Brazel, I said to him one day, do you know what happened to Wayne Brazel? He said, oh, yeah, we used to go to visit him in Arizona. I'm thinking the historians couldn't ask the Brazel family what happened to Wayne Brazel. I got to do it in a pickup truck driving across New Mexico, but I thought that was kind of interesting for the time. But I noticed things that we seem to have resolved 30 years ago, being reported in the beginning of the book when you're kind of giving a history of the Roswell case. And I wondered about your discovery of that information, or why you used that specific information and didn't kind of resolve it a little bit further.
Well, at the end of the day, Kevin, this was only my first book, so maybe there were some areas that I didn't get perfectly right, but I wanted to use what I felt were primary sources of information, and that would be witness statements from people who were there, and newspaper articles of the time. So that's where I got a lot of my information from. I've personally, of course, never interviewed anyone unlike yourself. Well,
then in a criticism of your book, which I'm going to make, your bibliography should have been a little bit more intensive, expansive. You mentioned a video that you watched of Glenn Dennis that you got from the National Archives. It's been 25 years since we discredited Glenn Dennis's story. I actually tried to get the video taken down because the Air Force had done in their investigation is they had requested from a lot of us, me included, the Fund for UFO Research, the Center for UFO Studies, Don Schmidt, Stan Friedman, people who were involved in the early investigations. And one of the things that I think the Fund for UFO Research provided to them on the condition they would return it was this interview with Glenn Dennis. It was made before we realized that he was not a credible source. I've tried to get the video removed simply because of copyright infringement, but they won't remove it. And it gives it a level of credibility I don't think it deserves, given what we know about Glenn Dennis today. And I only mention that because it allows me to mention that we don't believe Glenn Dennis. It's really not a criticism of you. It's a criticism of the way that particular videotape ended up in the National Archives, and it really shouldn't be there because of the added credibility it gives that tape.
Okay.
You have any comment or?
No, not really. I felt it was, Glenn Dennis was there at the time and he made a claim. So I felt it was warranted to find a place in the book. He mentioned someone claiming to be a mortuary officer, calling him from Roswell Base, talking about preserving tissues. So I thought, it's...
there's no question that the information that he provided was very, very interesting. It just wasn't the truth. So, and I again, that really shouldn't be a criticism of you, because what I'm trying to do here is not really denigrate your book, and we'll get into your analysis of the document here in just a moment, but people away from watching that video with an eye that it provides us with some good information, I guess is where I was going with that. And in a similar vein, I mean, when Don and I were doing our books on Roswell, we quoted from a guy named Frank Kaufman, whom we believed. Turned out he wasn't credible either. And so we've been very carefully making that point when we talk about this, because Frank Kaufman's story doesn't lend anything to the Roswell case. It takes us in a direction we don't really need to go. So your research was more in depth than the bibliography gives us here in your book.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. The bibliography is just over a page. It's not.
Yeah,
as you say, it's not expansive, but.
Well, I like I said, I would have liked to have seen a larger bibliography simply because, from my point of view, I always try to include the best sources or all the sources that I've looked at. So people would say, well, you've looked at this part of the story as well. I talked to Glenn Dennis many times. I talked to Walter Haught many times. And I shouldn't say Don Schmidt and I did it. Stan Friedman did it. Yeah. Tom Carey did it. I think of us as kind of the primary investigators after 1990 on the Roswell case. So I try to say, here's where the information came from. You can follow the sources or the footnotes or whatever to the primary source and see if I've misinterpreted it or you have a different interpretation. Because a lot of the information is open to interpretation. I'm sure you saw the article from the Alamogordo News from July 10th, where they were launching mogul balloons in an attempt to cover up the story.
I saw it on your blog yesterday.
And the one thing I should point out, the ladder, as they're holding up a couple of balloons and a Ray-1 target that they're about to launch, Charles Moore, who was involved in Alamogordo, told me he had bought that letter with petty cash. So kind of verifies what was going on there.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I would say is, I guess it's really not fair for me to come at you because I spent 30 years looking at this, and you spent 7 or 8 months looking at it.
Yeah, about a year.
And you had no opportunity to talk to some of these primary witnesses because they were long gone before you entered the investigation.
Yeah.
So you're stuck with the Ramey Memo.
So my source of information were limited, so I just worked with what I could get my hands on, basically. Okay,
so you downloaded the scans from the University of Texas at Arlington, Special Collections, and how did you examine them? Once you got the download, what was your methodology?
Well, as I say, I started with the word packing, even though I didn't have the middle letters for a while. But it really started when I was just sitting in front of a computer looking at the entire Ramey Memo on my screen. And I couldn't see anything. And I thought back to when I did my degree in art history and classical studies. My favourite subject was French Impressionism. And when you're viewing an artwork such as an Impressionist painting, you need to take a few steps back from the canvas because everything comes into focus. So I thought I'd give that a try. I stood up a couple of paces behind me here, looked at the memo, looked in the middle and saw a 4-word letter that jumped out of me, and that letter was SWAP, SWAP. So it really started from there.
When you were doing your initial research, did you look at the other interpretations the other people have made about the memo?
Yeah, mainly David Rudiak's. So I did already have some words which I felt fitted, which I did put in my draft, such as weather balloons, Fort Worth text disc, simple words like and the. There was probably, I don't know, 20 words in total, which I agreed with. And then it was just a matter of working out what the rest was based on basically bluntly just looking at the memo.
Well, there's a lot of various interpretations out there. Neil Morris, and I mentioned him simply because he was at a university there in England.
Yeah.
Did you come across his work?
I did in your 2002 article, the Message in a Bottle article.
Did you examine his interpretations at any depth, or was that just kind of a side issue?
No, not really. No, I didn't.
So there was you're aware of it then, but
I was, but it didn't really. Apart from I think he used the word wreck for the first time. I don't know. Was that David Rudiak or was that?
There were a lot of discussion going on back and forth at that time amongst various people, and I'm not sure who originated the idea of victims of the wreck or that key phrase.
Yeah.
I know in another interpretation that Josh Gates was involved in, if you remember any of his programs off the History Channel and that sort of thing. The guy who came in there thought the word was viewing the wreck.
Mm.
And I can see that as well when I look at the thing, viewing the wreck, and I'm thinking, well, that really is a different spin on the thing. If it's viewing the wreck, then it doesn't have the same, I guess, historical impact as victims of the wreck.
No, it doesn't. Victims obviously implies some sort of fatalities of the occupants. But I saw neither. I saw the P, I saw the A, I saw the final three letters, and I reasoned that the word had to be packing, and I still believe that.
I'm going to have to take a break here. I can't believe the time is getting old. Your book is, of course, the Roswell Memo, and it's available on Amazon, I suppose, or?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So those of you who would like to see your work, it lays out your thought processes all the way through, and I think that's very important to take a look at. It shows you how your thinking evolved. Roswell in the 21st century gives you a good impression of the history of the case, how it has evolved, what was going on back in 1947, and some of the things. I'll be back right after this, so please stick around. And we are back with David Jones. I have to admit, I keep almost forgetting to punch the button on the clock, so I know what the timing.
Yeah, well, time flies when you're having fun, as we say over here.
Once again, the book is the Roswell Memo. It's an examination specifically of the Ramey Memo as opposed to the history. It gives a bit of history of the Roswell case and some of the investigation that went on.
Yeah.
But that's
it's only a brief history.
Pardon me?
It's only a brief history.
Yeah. I noticed in looking at the evolution of your examination of the Ramey Memo, of course, you start out with your diary entries that you put in the book. Starts off basically with the ones everybody agrees with, Fort Worth, Texas, and that sort of thing. Yeah. What was the first big revelation you got as opposed to packing? Was there a big revelation that helps you out there?
Well, apart from swap, so I'll finish that line, packing of a wreck. After wreck, you have WSA, which is basically was with the A and the S transposed, which on the face of it appears to be a typo, but I think may have been done deliberately. The next word is, because I could see a C, an O, and two M's, I reasoned that was commenced. Then I did get the rest of the words, the rest of the letters, and then the next is in the, so it's, and the packing of a wreck was commenced in the. Once I had that done, the next line, that begins with a partial word because Ramey's thumb obscures the beginning of the word, and I could see ERE. After that, you've got at Fort Worth, Texas. So I think what the ERE is the final part of the word here. So the packing of a wreck was commenced in the here at Fort Worth, Texas. So gradually, it wasn't really line by line. It was more mixed than that. But the next line, I could see an N, an E, SS, and ES. I didn't know what that word was for a while, but the next words were on the disc. Then I got NYST, with the Y replacing the U. It happens to be next to U on a keyboard. Then the next word was AHVE, which is a jumbled up version of the word have. The next word is new, spelt KNRW, R replacing the E. And I admit, Kevin, when you see this for the first time, it's not going to be easy to see. The next word was the, THE, then higher and likelihood. So I went back to the first word, NESSES, and realised that it probably said witnesses. So witnesses on the disc must have knew the higher likelihood, with some letters transposed or substituted for others. And I figured that this must have been done deliberately.
Well, I noticed you in your interpretation, and I think David Rudiak follows along with this. The memo is signed Ramey at the bottom, Ramey. Yeah. Originally, and I think it may have been Neil Morris and his group, the Roswell Photo Interpretation Team, who came up with the idea that word might be temple. Temple. Yeah. Which temple was supposedly a code name for J. Edgar Hoover. I don't know if that's true or not. I think the consensus is it may be Ramey. But here's another question. J. Bon Johnson, the man who took the photographs, the reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and he said at one point that when he got into Ramey's office, he handed him what essentially would have been the teletype message that the Fort Worth Star-Telegram got. Yeah. Which changes the whole importance of the memo. Do you get the impression that might have been a teletype from a newspaper teletype as opposed to communication through a military communications channel?
No, I see Ramey's surname on the bottom of it. I don't see a scenario where J. Bon Johnson handed in the document simply for photographic purposes because it would look good. The information I found on the document, I think would be considered sensitive. So I think it was some sort of military communication.
Did you look at other military communications from that time frame?
No. But as Ramey's holding it and it's got his name on, I'm guessing.
Oh, I know. I'm the one that got the document that showed it was taken on July 8th, 1947 at 11:59 p.m. Yeah. When I went to the Bentman Photo Archives and they sent me information about that. So yes, Ramey's holding the document, and yes, it was taken on July 8th, 1947, which doesn't necessarily negate the idea that Johnson brought it in and handed it to Ramey so Ramey would be holding something, which is what he said originally. He repudiated that later on, of course, realizing how it negated the importance of what he had done if it was not a document.
Because but he came up with an interpretation, didn't he, J. Bon Johnson?
Pardon me?
He worked on the memo, didn't he, in the early
Yes,
days?
I think he worked with Neil Morris on the and Ron Rediger on the Roswell Photo Interpretation Team, or Photographic Interpretation Team. I think they all did that. But the question really relates to this, and something that's always bothered me about the interpretations of the Ramey Memo is there doesn't seem to be any military jargon in it.
No, it doesn't appear to say secret or classified, which I know you've raised before, and we can only see the bottom half of the document. We don't see the upper half. We can't make that out. So I don't know if anything was on there.
Well, one of the things you learn as you deal with classified documents, and I did as an intelligence officer for years and years and years, is you stamp the top and the bottom. So if it was classified, there should have been a secret stamp at the bottom of the document. That would make
sense, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there at this point. I guess what I'm asking is, I've been in meetings in the military where the jargon was flying so fast and loose that you lose track of what people are saying. It's like a foreign language, and I see no military jargon in the text of the document. No military units identified. That sort of thing, and that I find a little bit worrisome. which is not to say it couldn't be almost clear text. I just find that a little bit worrisome.
The jargon you saw, would that have been in place in 1947?
Pardon me?
The jargon you saw at the time when you were a serving officer, would that have been in place in 1947?
Some of it would have.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and I'm not sure that this is relevant, but in a lot of the military documents through the communication center, they don't have periods, they don't have commas. At the end of the sentence, they put PD.
Yeah.
And in other places, they put CMA for comma.
Yeah.
But there's none of that in the document, which does not negate it. It just merely, it means one of two things, which is A, it came through a teletype that had those punctuations on it, or it was typed by Ramey's secretary. So.
I think that Ramey penned it and someone else typed it. I don't know whether it was his secretary or not, because I think the information on it is sensitive, probably a bit too sensitive for a secretary.
Well, Ramey's secretary would have been cleared to type the document, as would his aide, who passed away before we could get to him to check with him to see what his deal was. But you saw nothing that you would consider military jargon or anything like that in your interpretation. I've had the same discussion with David Rudiak, by the way.
No, I just saw a normal document appearing like a normal telegram or a teletype. As you say, it has commas and it has periods. So yeah, of course I'm no expert on military jargon. I'm just a civilian, but I could see nothing that I would construe as military jargon on a document.
Well, we also tried to pin down the font, the typeface that would have been used at that time. And there was really nothing there to suggest, clearly the document was typed in 1947, but trying to identify the source of it. Was it a typewriter? Was it a teletype? Was it military? Was it civilian? And really couldn't pin anything down there that was definitive.
Well, I did look into that slightly. When I was working on the packing word, or victim's word, as some people think it is, when I looked at the A, it kind of looked like an I. But the more I looked at it, it looked like an A, but a kind of narrow A. So I thought, okay, well, where can I find a document from this era where I can compare the type? So I went into the Roswell report, and there's a batch of documents from 1947 from the 509th Bomb Group. And there's, of course, that letter passing command on was it July the 8th, 47, from Blanchard to his second in command. And I compared the A that I could see on the memo to the A's on that document, which would have been a typed document, of course. And it was a match. So today the font is called Special Elite. But at the time, I think it was just a normal standard type for a typewriter.
So you did examine other documents from the era to see if there was consistencies.
Yeah. And
you found some of those consistencies.
Yeah, but not all of the letters were in that standard form because of the state of the document. Some of the letters are in a very basic form, like they've been handwritten, which I think would present difficulty for any artificial intelligence analysis of the document. Hopefully that will happen in the future, but I think that will present difficulties if it's expecting to see standardized font as you would get from a typewriter from the 1940s. There are only a few letters that are that precise.
Well, that was the one thing, and people have said, if he wasn't folding the document the way it was, if the camera was a foot further away, the angle was a little bit different, we would have a better chance of reading some of this. And artificial intelligence is now whether they're applying to the document to see if it can resolve some of the problems. There is no consensus at the moment. I know that David Rudiak applied some artificial intelligence to it in the last couple of months, and he did get victims of the wreck out of it. And it was really exciting information because this is what the artificial, but he tried it again and got a completely different interpretation. So there's no even consistency with the artificial intelligence. But I thought it was interesting that he tried that method. And but the artificial intelligence can draw from anything in the internet. So it depends.
I think it's worth a try.
Oh, absolutely.
And I understand it was ChatGPT that was used.
Yes, exactly. We're going to have to take another break here, unbelievably. Once again, your book is the Roswell Memo. I'm going to go in a different direction here. One of my books is Leveland, and I think the Leveland case is as important as the Roswell case, given the number of witnesses, the interaction with the environment, and physical evidence. And I am here with David Jones. Before I get back to David Jones, my blog is at kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and there's a lot of information. I think there's nearly 1,500 various postings on there. It goes back to 2007, so there's practically something there for everybody interested in UFOs and some of the paranormal activities, and even lost mines and buried treasures. There's some stuff about that as well. When we went away, we were talking about your interpretations of various aspects of the Ramey Memo and how did you do it. What was your final interpretation? How did you reach the final interpretation at the end of the book?
You want me to read it out?
Pardon me?
You want me to read out the final interpretation?
Well, sure, why not?
Yeah. Well, it really depends. Basically, I believe the document was, the words were altered with a very simple substitution and transposition cipher, simply to alter the appearance of the words.
Wait, are you suggesting the Ramey Memo was encrypted in some fashion?
Yes, in a very crude form. I believe the people there were in a hurry to do this because it wasn't a proper cipher, because the substituted words happened to be in a surrounding group of keys on a typewriter keyboard that surround the true letter. So I think that's how they did it. So
some of the words are in the clear, and some of the words are encrypted.
Yeah, it only appears to be partially encrypted. Why? I don't know.
But wouldn't that also be a suggestion that maybe the interpretation isn't quite accurate? Because we can see the words in the clear, and we're looking at it as maybe encrypted, but it might be that we just can't resolve it close enough.
I think it was done in a hurry, so that's the only reason I can see to support that argument.
So,
some words you can make out some words properly. I say swap is in there. I don't know if you see that now, but there's rec, which is there. These are all spelt with their proper letters, but there are some that, to me, have the hallmarks of being encrypted in a very simple fashion.
Well, you have one line where you're talking, I think it's kind of unclear what it says, but it says aliens in it, and then ET, and goes on from there. If I read that correctly,
that's line number 5. It basically reads as, when the method of encryption is taken into account, whole ship O-night. O-night being, I guess, short for overnight. And it continues, beings are aliens tacitly, ET origin in nature.
So
ET is on that line.
So they're using the word alien and ET in the text. Is that not encrypted? That's in the clear?
No, it's not in the clear. Aliens is spelled A-P-E-I-J-S. P, bear with me. P is above L on a keyboard. The E and the I have been transposed, and J is next to N on a keyboard. That's how it's spelled.
But they use the term ET. Is that an encrypted term?
On its own, yeah. ET in what appear to be quotation marks.
That the term ET was being used in 1947 to refer to alien creatures.
Well, the origin of ET as an abbreviation, I think, goes back to the probably 1860s or 1870s. So it was in use in some circles. So I think Ramey would have known it, but obviously we now know ET mostly because of the Steven Spielberg film. But I think I'm not sure if it was that well known amongst wide circles then.
Okay.
I think Ramey used it for that purpose.
I know that when Don and I were doing the first Roswell book, one of the things we were told by Frank Joyce was that Mac Brazel had said, you know how they talk about little green men? Well, they weren't green. And we were trying to figure out, when did that term enter the lexicon? And what we found out is there was a science fiction story, I think, published in Green Man, which was about an alien being.
Yeah.
There was John Carter's Adventures on Mars by began in 1913, I think it was. Yeah. And there was an Italian book or something, I forget the exact details, of around the turn of the century, the turn of the last century, 1900. All that's laid out in a footnote in Roswell in the 21st century. The point simply is we look about that lexicon. How did it enter? When did it enter? I doubt seriously Mac Brazel knew about little green men from science fiction, but it was definitely out there in the public arena more so than some of the other terms. So
as was aliens, the word aliens. I found out that was first used in a 1936 short story, science fiction story. It's in one of the pulp magazines, a story called The Robot Aliens by a guy called Iando Binder. Apparently he was quite a big science fiction writer.
Well, I think there was also a number of newspaper articles that we found that referred to aliens, and there was one, but they usually suggested the aliens were from Mars, I think.
Yeah, that was, I think that probably comes from H.G. Wells, doesn't it? War of the Worlds. There was no thinking that they could have come from anywhere outside of our solar system.
I think the thinking in the 1940s, at least, was the flying saucers were interplanetary as opposed to interstellar. Yeah, interstellar. They were coming from somewhere inside the solar system, and Mars was the most likely candidate, I think, when you take a look at the science, although there was some discussion about Venus being a very tropical planet with lots of humidity and clouds, which we now know not even close to right.
Yeah.
But mostly it was, they were looking at Mars and that sort of thing. I was a little bit,
isn't it, for some sort of life?
Yeah, I was a little bit bothered by the term ET in there, though. I thought that was a little bit anachronistic.
Well, ET is an abbreviation for extraterrestrial, obviously, amongst other things. But it was used since almost the middle of the 19th century as an abbreviation for extraterrestrial. Obviously not meaning aliens, but meaning anything from outside.
You say the middle of the 19th century?
Yeah, around that. I think it was about the 1860s.
1860s.
Yeah, the origin.
So you were looking for the etymology of that word then?
Yeah.
That term. Okay. So your thinking evolved from it being a mogul balloon as a legitimate explanation for it to the point where reading the memo and other documentation suggested maybe that isn't a good solution?
Yeah, I veered away from a mogul balloon theory because from what I see on the memo, it's got nothing to do with a mogul balloon. It even says on line 7, according to my interpretation, only just show TR being an abbreviation for transposition of weather balloons. The next word is unknown. I don't know what it is. The last word is here.
But your opinion now of the Roswell case, when you began your investigation, you said you read through the Air Force report and you were convinced that mogul was probably a viable explanation.
I wasn't convinced, but I was leaning towards that. But I did read it again, and I didn't, in the end, I didn't believe it. And I do believe it was an ET event.
Do you know what point your thinking kind of evolved away from from the mogul event as you were looking through the documentation? What was there a key that kind of suggested to you it might not have been mogul?
Well, if we look at a picture of Ramey and Dubose, they've got a used neoprene weather balloon in front of them, and what appear to be not even a complete single radar reflector. A mogul balloon with its full array had multiple balloons and multiple radar reflectors. So that in itself is an indicator that something is up.
Well, the one thing, I'll leave you with this thought because I've got to break away. I'll leave you with this thought. According to the documentation, according to what Charles Moore told me, flight number 4 was configured exactly as flight number 5. There were no Ray 1 targets in flight number 5. So where did the Ray 1 target come from?
Yeah, exactly. Personally, I think it was just taken from the stores at Fort Worth.
Yeah. Well, once again, the book is Roswell Memo. David Jones is the author and an artist, I guess. I probably shouldn't say I guess. That's probably mean. and an artist. And I'll put a link up to your art website as well, so that people can take a look at that. And take a look at the book. It is kind of interesting to see it from a perspective of someone who came into the story sort of late and how his thinking evolved from one point to another. So it does make it interesting. Look at it that way. David Jones, thank you so much for being on A Different Perspective.
My pleasure.
That was kind of an interesting conversation for me. I had read through his book, and like I said, and I brought it up a number of times, I was a little bit concerned about the bibliography because it looked like he hadn't done the proper amount of research. One of the things you learn as you're beginning research, as you go through the academic world or the scientific world, is you look at the literature, see what has been published prior to your research, so you don't have to move on and expand on what has been published in the past. And it looked like he hadn't done the proper due diligence in the research. But talking it with him, he did look at an awful lot of stuff. The bibliography, I think he would have been better off just to leave it out or expanded it immensely. It really gives a bad impression. So we'll clarify that he did an awful lot of research, and he does know coming into it when he did. As I say, I think the book I should probably mention now is one I just came out not that long ago. It was called 1973, and it's a look at the UFO phenomena in 1973, culminating, I guess you could say, in the Hicks and Parker abduction. And I find the Hicks and Parker abduction interesting simply because of the documentation of the number of witnesses, people who were there in October of 1973 who witnessed. Now, witness is not quite witnessed the UFO, I think is the best way of saying it. May have had some impression of the abduction going on. There's documentation to support that. And there's names of people and that sort of thing. So I think it's an interesting thing that we need to take a look at. And probably the other thing I should mention, the latest book I had published was called The Proxy War. And it has to do with the series I did beginning with Bob Cornett, called Vietnam Ground Zero. It's an action adventure series. So I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of months at least, producing some new books for that series because people have been asking for that sort of thing. So if you get a chance and you want to look at some of that, it sort of hits on my experiences in Vietnam. The book prior to that, called Pioneer Post, actually is based on an incident in Vietnam that I was involved in tangentially in 1969. So it's kind of an interesting read from that point. So take a look at that if you are of a mind. But once again, the UFO books, The Level Land is interesting, Encounter in the Desert, about the Socorro landing, 1973, Understanding Roswell, and Roswell in the 21st Century. Well, that's what I got for tonight. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll check with you next time.